to address chartered accountants who tend to be quite live wires. And then I have a blend of other live wires, the lawyers. So it's 1 and 1, 11, not 2. And that's going to be quite enjoyable. And post-lunch session, and I have resolved that I am not going to allow anybody to doze off. So, keeping that in mind, if you look at the presentation structure, I have put introductory remarks. That is the NPL problem, and then of course the liquidation process, the distribution of assets, the priority there, voluntary liquidation, fast track. These 4 components are from the code itself, and I'm absolutely certain most of you have read those. Now, since those are a part of the presentation, the various clauses, regulations have been captured in the table, but I'm going to move very fast on them. I'm just going to catch on to the topics, the points, which are very weighty and where we can have some takeaway. Otherwise, you can always hear and forget about it, right? Effective settlement and determination of inherent value of the asset and asset reconstruction. There's only one slide on that, but I guess we're going to have a substantial discussion on that. I have put some practical and conceptual aspects, and I will discuss something on synergist dure without malice to anyone. Not the Kushwan Singhs with malice to all, the old one. The last one is ongoing discussion. So it's not necessary that you have to wait for the presentation to be over and then you ask questions. Please do interject as and when you like. Only thing, raise your hand so that the mic can follow you. In any case, you're going to have discussions later on. Right? So we begin with the first one. Is it possible to see this?
Not legible.
Well, I'll explain to you. Yes, you might be aware of the figures, but there is no harm in spending. In any case, even if you are unable to see that, I am going to tell you that. Ultimately, the idea is to drive home some point. Now, if you look at, see the top curve, how the advances have moved. The gross NPA, the middle one, they have zoomed, and that's about 12.5% as in 2017 31st March. The standard restructured assets and NPAs together was 18.5% and still growing. And if you look at, that was the public sector banks. And if you look at the private sector bank, the y-axis on the left side is a log scale. So it's from 100 to 10,000 billion. It's grown. It's again zoomed. The pattern is the same, but from 2 it's gone to about 2.7%. And this kind of massive difference, 12.5 and 2.5%, has not been a chance phenomenon. We aren't facing any economic meltdown that the PSBs, public sector banks, have had these kind of problems. So what do I mean to say here? The reason is here. This is a World Bank statistics. Japan has recovery of 92.5% from the NPAs. The OECD countries 68.6%. Asia is pretty bad. But India has the dubious distinction of being the worst here, 13.7%. Next one, if you see, this is something which I picked up from the RBI website. The recovery has come down to 10%. Why is it so? And how IBC becomes important here? Any guess why it's so bad here? Why it's happening this way in India? Why the recovery is so poor? You have debt, you have equity coming, and if it's a distressed company and if the assets are sold, granted that by and large the enterprise value will be more. But at least the assets, the recovery should relate to the book value, but it's 1/10 of the book value. And that's because here the fourth bullet is the result of asset overstatement, and that's a euphemism for gold plating. I think there's a good enough, introduction before we get started. Now, why it's important to discuss this? Let's look at the liquidation process. The good thing about the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is that it draws from the best and the evolving legislations globally. Particularly the UK Bankruptcy Code. And make no mistake, it's not merely an insolvency resolution code, it's also a recovery code. So when you talk of the British code, you just don't talk of the bankruptcy code, resolution code, but you talk of the recovery code as well. Now what happened was, in the UK, you had secured creditors who were driving the committee of creditors. And whenever there was a good asset cover, they would simply sell off. So the asset which had to be on companies as operating assets was being defeated. So the UK sometime in 2003, it was amended, and the committee of creditors comprised even other lenders. And the result was that the recovery went up. I mean, no price for guessing why the recovery went up. Because if they were to be sold piecemeal or even as, a single group of assets, those would have fetched less than the going concerns. In the UK, the creditor recovery is 75%. It was not there in the World Bank statistics which I quoted, because that was source, World Bank source, but other World Bank source has recorded that the UK recovery code and the bankruptcy code leads to 75% creditor recovery. And with the creditors comprising both secured and others, the recovery has gone up. But simultaneously, the cost of the process also went up. And therefore, the net recovery was the same. The third thing which happened in the UK code was that timelines were added. And the result is yet to be seen, but it seems that the recovery would eventually, even the net recovery in the UK code with the timelines will be higher. And the beauty here is that we have these timelines. As I see, it's been borrowed from the UK code, not from the US code. The second most important thing, I'm just leading you to the liquidation part, is the Swedish approach. In Sweden, all the deals have to be mandatorily put for auction. What do you think is the situation in India? I'm sure some of you must be already registered professionals, registered. What do you think in India? Is it a compulsory auction? Actually, if you look at section 29 and section 30, Under section 29, the information memorandum is prepared by the interim resolution professional or the resolution professional. I'll use this interchangeably, resolution professional. Eventually, under section 30, the resolution applicant has to be chosen, somebody who comes up with the best deal, right? So, effectively, without saying, putting in those so many words, in India, the code entails a compulsory auction, really speaking. So, of course, the preferred bidder is the one, the second bullet, who submits the best resolution plan under section 30. And the resolution plan, which is accepted by the Committee of Creditors, if it gets approved by the NCLT under section 31, well, that's adopted. NCLT may reject, as you are all aware. I'm not going to go into the details why, because you are all generally aware of it. If it obviously does not meet the relevant section 29, obviously it gets rejected. And if it's rejected, NCLT may give time, some more time, or it may lead to liquidation. That's why we're talking about the liquidation, right? And of course, there are a few areas where it rejects because it was a non-compliant resolution plan under section 31(3), or if no resolution plan is received under section 30, or in case of the fast track within those 90 days, or the corporate debtor is contravened. In fact, therefore, when this legislation came, I thought that this was a godsend opportunity for the beleaguered lenders in India. Do you know, as MD and CEO of Sidri's ARC, I wrote letters to the Department of Financial Services giving a synopsis of what had happened from 1998 onwards. And despite engaging the best lawyers even in Supreme Court, when the asset was sold under RDDP-FI Act, there were some problems because of some court injunction on the SURFACE sale. So it was done under RDDP-FI Act. And you know, in RDDP-FI Act, the sale is done through the, the receiver, the recovery officer of the DRT. So the company can say that, the lender can say that, look, I was hands off, he has sold it. That was a smart tactic adopted and it was sold. It's been more than 6 months that my tenure was over in ISAR and nothing has happened still. And it's celebrating 2 decades of delay. Miscellaneous applications after applications. And our lawyer friends know it too well how to help the client. Right? No such thing is possible here. Section 22 of SICA, I am glad that in this country SICA has been consigned to the dustbin, but that allowed infinite moratorium, literally. Here the moratorium is fixed. Beyond that, there is no reprieve for the defaulting party. And that's the beauty of it. And the liquidation process is governed. Now I am just coming to the liquidation process, etc. At this juncture, I want you people to tell me what you feel about some of these. Like if you look at the liquidation process, you get started, section 34. Again, the difference is that everything is driven by the Committee of Creditors. The powers of the board and the key management personnel are frozen. The company personnel must extend full cooperation, and the resolution professional can be replaced if the resolution plan submitted by him or her contravenes. Section 30. Now, the third bullet here, the company personnel must extend full cooperation. how many of you think this would be a very effective situation? I'll not name a company where if you read the audited balance sheet, you wonder why the auditor continued with that assignment. The firm should have simply walked out and said, we are not interested. Because every figure is qualified. So it's something like calling an audited account where no figure is audited or verified. The fundamental here is that when the information memorandum is being made, the completed year, the most recent completed year must be audited. The figures must be very reliable. Now the information memorandum serves as a basic document for any resolution applicant. Now, you remember the transaction document, if there is any, takeover deal, where it was Chorus, which was bought by Tata's, or any takeover. Actually, mergers and takeovers, aside from the mergers of equals, like let's say Vodafone and Idea, it's always, acquisition followed by merger. In fact, I would prefer to call it A&M. So here what we are trying to do is, we are trying to catalyze acquisition. And for acquisition, the two things which are most crucial are a very credible information memorandum, and second is a very credible auction. It's not auction on the normal kind, but it's a competitive bidding. We'll just come over to that. Now, if ultimately, if the resolution professional submitted a resolution plan which is, non-compliant, it can be rejected. Powers and duties of liquidator, section 35. He steps in the shoes, he does two things essentially if you see. He has to act in terms of the regulations which have been separately drafted, and we all know that the rules, the fundamental questions of law have been captured in a small document. The rest is, it's like a pull-down menu. The other menus are in the form of rules and regulations which happen. So even for the liquidation, we have the regulations, which have 7 chapters, and which gives down, the way forward for the liquidator. But essentially it does two things. If it's operating, for the time being, let it operate, and for that even draw or accept negotiable instruments and everything, and at the same time do the process for its liquidation. So he has all encompassing powers. It's not that if it's being liquidated, the operations will be totally standstill. The operations will always be there. The fundamental differentiator is the value. If the asset value is more than the enterprise value, it has got to be liquidated, unless somebody wants to sacrifice enormously. Are you getting my point? If I remember correctly, Hanjin, one of the biggest container firms of Korea, has got liquidated simply because its assets were more valuable than enterprise value. But if you would look at Synergy's Dure, there effectively the lenders got 4.8%. Now if somebody is ready to sacrifice so much, well, you can always have a revised value which is more than the asset value. Coming to this particular entire slide, it talks of essentially, I just want to know before I continue, how many of you are, the registered resolution professionals or who have cleared this exam? Great. So there is about 10% are the ones. So I expect that you stand up and raise some point And even if you want to add something, you're welcome to come over here. So the idea is that others should have a takeaway, right? I have listed the provisions and the rules and regulations consistent with the topics, but it is not necessary that each and every component will be separately discussed. I'm only taking the gist of every slide. The hard copy is with you, right? So here, he creates a liquidation estate. He's got to get the valuation done, invite the claims, examine the claims, and accept or reject the claim. And when you are rejecting the claim, give the reasons. And it also provides for appeal against his or her decision, essentially. Now, there is slight, repetition here. The moment the interim resolution professional walks in, he has to within 1 week hire valuers for 2 independent liquidation values. Now those liquidation values have a specific purpose. What is the purpose? If there is any dissenting creditor who does not agree with the COC, see, the COC's decision would be carried through if there is 75% voting. But if they are dissenting, then there has to be a remedy. So the dissenting creditors must get the amount first before the others. But that amount would be something that they would have got had it been liquidated. So liquidation really does serve the purpose indeed. There are some other reasons as well. So you're doing the liquidation value when you're walking in. And if let's say 2 months down the line, the bankers decide that there is no point in wasting time, let's liquidate, the whole process starts again. I believe going forward there will be some kind of rationalization. There need not be a repetition of this. So anyway, this is what this particular slide captures. The 2 very critical points are the undervalued transactions and extortionate transactions. In my 3 decades of experience in financial services, I have seen huge taggings and diversions, but nobody has been caught adopting extortionate transactions or undervalued transactions. But it's anyway there, and the information memorandum requires scanning of all the records for 2 years, and these transactions, if they have been done 2 years prior to the insolvency commencement date, those have to be reversed. So in case the resolution professional stumbles upon those, why stumbles upon? In fact, he has to with a microscope go look for it, because there are some people who do such irregular jobs rather inelegantly. Many people do very elegantly, so they might get caught. So he has to, with a honeycomb, with a comb, thin comb, he has to go through and identify and seek to reverse. And then he can seek the avoidance of these transactions and reversal of these transactions. Now imagine if somebody is walking in, say you are appointed as a resolution person, professional, you are, let's say, replacing an interim resolution professional. It happens. Section 10, if the corporate proposes a resolution professional, the lenders often have less confidence irrespective of how good the professional is, and they seek to change. In any case, since it's COC driven, the COC can always seek to change under section 22(2). Right? Now, if you enter as a resolution professional, and if you find that there are irregularities, the audit is very qualified, Now you have the responsibility of coming up with a credible information memorandum and reversing such, transactions, extortionate and other one. What would you do? If it's qualified, if every figure, every transaction is qualified by the auditor, it only means two things. One, the company has not cooperated, or second, the company has cooperated, but there is something radically wrong on this. While you are required to bring about a credible information memorandum, you don't have credible figures. So you can approach the NCLT under section 19(1), and the NCLT will pass order asking them to cooperate. I think the section 19(1) will be required very often in case of the profligate promoters. And if even after that, if it's you don't get information, then let it be a qualified information memorandum on the basis of which you go ahead. This talks of the order of adjudicating authority in respect of extortionate credit transaction. Essentially, you reverse it. And if there is any party which has benefited, that party has to make good. If any party has, suffered on account of that, compensate that. It's essential. So it's basically restoring the balance here. Section 52 is something which you have to always remember. Why this IBC code is an amazing opportunity for the banks. Anybody from banks here? Nobody from the bank? Insolvency and bankruptcy, it's fashionable to say that it is meant for enhancing, maximizing the enterprise value. Now tell me one thing, if enterprise value is maximized, isn't the creditors' recovery also maximized?
Yes.
Absolutely, because creditors get the first bucket in the waterfall. So that's maximized. So, if it is being said that it's meant for maximizing enterprise value, it does not mean that it doesn't focus on recovery. Ultimately, it's for the recovery of the creditor's money. Now, if it is liquidated, the lenders have the options. Either you allow your assets to be pooled and get your money paid, you claim paid, admissible claim paid, in terms of the waterfall given in section 53. In any case, it will be 53. But if you have charge on specific asset, you may adopt that recovery from that asset for debt servicing. Now, see, surfacing, I think we must have been advising some companies about, maybe some banks about adopting surfacing. Surfacing was an act meant for the bank's entry straight away and taking possession. And if there was no cooperation, the banks could go to the metropolitan or magistrate or the district magistrate, get a police help and then take possession and then sell off. Under section 17, any aggrieved party could go to DRT. Otherwise, surfacing has nothing to do with DRT. Surface is totally out of. But if that has gone to the adjudication, it's DRT. So for surfacing, 60% creditors have to come together. But in IBC, now why would I go to surface if I am a lender? Oh, I am holding a very valuable asset. Let me catch hold of it and sell off. Now if somebody is gone under section 17, though section 17 requires only 45 days for resolution, but those periods in RDDB, FI or Surfacing Act, forget about secret, those immensely forgettable, are not sacrosanct. Here the timelines are absolutely sacrosanct. After admission of the application, right? So I have a great asset. I am thwarted by the legal delays. I go to IBC as a lender. I have it liquidated in the committee of creditors, decision to liquidate, and then I say that, look, here I would realize my security interest from my asset, and if there is still shortfall in my recovery, if the asset yields so much that everyone else is already serviced, then from the remaining waterfall I might get. And if I am unable to sell, I can have it sold through the liquidator. Again, here this is not the government liquidator, not the official liquidator. That's a 10-year program, if not more. Here it can be done very fast. The court puts a limit of 2 years, but it can be done much faster. I can have the liquidator selling it for me, paying the money after deducting. So that's the beauty of this section 52. Distribution of assets. Section 53. The cash flow waterfall, first the insolvency resolution costs and the liquidation costs paid in full. Either the insolvency resolution process cost or the liquidation cost. Workmen's use for a period of 24 months preceding the liquidation date. And the debt owed to the secured creditors. So secured creditors and the workers' use for 2 years are pari passu. Wages and unpaid dues owed to employees other than workmen for a period of 12 months. So if there are officers, if there are top executives drawing a crore of salary, etc., if there is nothing left, they will go empty-handed. Financial debts owed to unsecured creditors. Now imagine here why the COC's composition of having unsecured creditors has a barrier. If there is a liquidation, they won't get anything. But if there is a good enterprise value, they will support it. So the unsecured creditors, if they are substantial in number, can make or break a potentially good resolution plan. But they will never break it simply because it's a good resolution plan. And my experience shows that when we go for selling assets, a lot of cartelization happens. That's always a challenge. Plus, the valuations which are coming, if it's a value for the entire plan and if you want to sell piecemeal, the sum of pieces doesn't total up to the total value. Because one machine uprooted destroys the foundations also at times. Then comes the government dues after the unsecured creditors. For 2 years preceding the commencement date and unpaid dues on account of the debt due. And of course the fee payable to liquidators is deducted proportionally from the proceeds. I have to tell you one thing here. Something, when you are talking about resolution plan, resolution plan contains various components which were coming. But when you are making a resolution plan, obviously you are expecting significant write-offs from various parties. The interesting point is that since the IBC, bypasses various acts, it can even make changes in the charter, the memorandum, and articles of association, even the capital structure, everything. So any new party coming in might see, look, I need so much of ownership here. If it's a listed company, it can be done. But ultimately, it's about trimming liabilities to a level which can be serviced. And please remember, trimming of liabilities was being done in CDR from the year 2002 onwards. We had CDR, you had SDR, you had S4A. nowhere it was successful. Any guess why it was not successful? And why here? There is a reason for the registered plan to be successful. Any idea? Why all those SCDR and all those are failures? Big failures.
Information asymmetries.
Yeah?
Information asymmetry was
Yeah.
information asymmetry.
That's very important, which is a phrase used. You know, you are walking into it, the information memorandum that the registered professor garners gives first-hand information. But it's important that you know that information is essentially the historical information. Maybe history is just 15 days old, but it's historical. The resident professional has a chance to comprehend the business complexities, the upsides and downsides, and come up with a figure. The other very important point is that if timeline is there, and if the registered plan fails, then it is a necessary liquidation. So in CDR, if you are a promoter, you went to get a lease of life, knowing well that the bankers will again flounder and again he will go ad infinitum. No such thing here. And therefore the haircut sometimes will become a haircut. Yeah. So in such a case, what will be the kind of formula you would apply? For liquidation, this is the waterfall. But if sacrifices have to be done, you have no clue how you're going to do. And the code has, very wisely left that open-ended. While you may draw from this principle, yet you may have to do something more. Without going into the merits of the figure, synergy dure allows some payments even to the government after a moratorium of 1 year and 5 equal installments more. So when I think you have a tremendous opportunity as chartered accountants, of course, to advise companies to come up with very effective resolution plans. And resolution plan is nothing but an acquisition document. Right? I think I have something more to say. I'll go to the next slide. This has to come in the chronology, but beyond that we could discuss something more. See, as you know, the code captures the most, the robust principles of law, and then it gets expanded in terms of rules and regulation. There is one rule which has been released and there are several regulations. Now, there is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of India Elimination Process Regulation 2016. This is divided into 7 chapters, actually 7 chapters, not 6 chapters. The first is preliminary and definitions. The second is appointment and remuneration of the liquidator. The same registered professional becomes a liquidator, and his remuneration is also fixed. Up to 9 crore of recovery he gets 5%, and then it tapers down to 0.25% at 50 crore and above. Very substantial, one would say, money. So it makes sense to be a resolution professional, and a moral hazard to push it to liquidation. But why not? Do it. If the bankers are sleeping, definitely do it. Say it's we know the commercial world is dog eat dog world, buyer beware. So definitely it will be unethical to push to liquidation something which has got a great enterprise value. But it is also for the committee of creditors to be alive to that. Right? Powers and functions of liquidator, which we earlier discussed, those are discussed in great detail. Essentially, take possession, create a liquidation estate, allow operations, execute contracts for or against, defend or initiate suits, everything you do, and eventually get the valuation done again, seek the claims again, evaluate the claims, and again do the whole thing. So valuation, mode of sales, and the proceeds of liquidation. The overall process takes a minimum 6 months. Now here we have a challenge. There are times when some assets must be liquidated fast or you might lose value. Fortunately, the code does allow those things to be captured. Some of the regulations do allow even sale of assets which are unencumbered, provided they constitute no more than 10% of the claim value. But even otherwise, if you want to sell off because you might have impairment in value, you can still approach under section 65 and still sell off. But essentially this captures the whole process in detail, what is already been discussed in the sections. And as I said earlier, there is a bit of a repetition. I would say not bit of a significant. Again doing valuation and again seeking claim. There is a repetition. I think the founding fathers thought it would be prudent because ultimately if it's been liquidated, let somebody who has missed out have a chance. Because even when the initial claims are sought and 30 days time is given, and if somebody has missed out, that entity can always approach before the finalization of resolution plan. So there is a flexibility. I think voluntary liquidation. This is slightly heavy. I'm sure you are all aware. You are the smallest of the companies if you want to voluntarily close. You are advised not to. You are advised to let it go down the drain. But the recent happenings have shown that even that's not a good idea because the directors got disqualified. What happens here? The fellow approaches the NCLT, just warn me half an hour before. There has to be a declaration, board of directors, essentially two things here. If there is no lender here, and if it is not meant to defraud anybody more smoothly, yet there has got to be an insolvency professional coming in. If there are creditors, 2/3 of the creditors must approve this. Once this is submitted, and once the 2/3 of the creditors approve this, then notification to the ROC and the board about resolution, and the date of that resolution constitutes the commencement of liquidation, and it's captured in sections 35 to 53. Let's look at the basic parameters of this. From the liquidation commencement date, the operations must stop. This is the interesting part of the voluntary liquidation. Except which are necessary. Let's say if you are a chemical plant and if you suddenly stop it, it might lead to a huge impairment. See, often the chemical plants are continuous processes, and if they have to be even closed down, there are protocols of doing it. If you have steel plants, if there is a sudden seizure, closure, the maintenance cost may be very high. So in such cases, except as required for the beneficial winding up, liquidator is appointed, and of course the liquidator has to prepare and submit a preliminary report and then annual status report and all that. So imagine, and minutes of consultation with stakeholder and final report. So this entire plan captures for potentially big companies also. It is not necessary that there would be an annual status report. You can even close down in 6 months. It's still in books of account, and of course you can engage professionals for evaluation, etc. Here again, see, that is while the liquidation under section 34 or a voluntary liquidation, the liquidation process is essentially the same. But in case of voluntary, the parameters that we discussed do apply. Thereafter, of course, the whole thing starts. Claims and getting claims, examining, 30 days, that's done. And if any claimant is asked to prove the debt, the cost has to be borne by him. But for verification, of course, the authority bears the cost. These are some of the normal things, but I want you to look at the Regulation 27. Regulation 27 said debt payable at a future time that is discounted at the present value, that is in the present value form, discounted at the government yield. What do you think about this? Do you think this is a very balanced or a fair thing? What do you think? If I am going to receive, let's say, 25 lakh every quarter for 4 years, and now this money is being converted into present value, discounted at the, at the comparable period. Is it? Huh? Is it fair? Is it fair to whom? To the claimant or?
Yeah, no, the point I was trying to make is, your question whether it's fair or not. Now, obviously, if you look at it from a finance perspective or from an investor perspective or a lender perspective, it doesn't seem fair. But then we have to understand that this is a process in liquidation. We're looking at a scenario where we have a whole gamut of creditors, operational creditors, government trading issues. Somewhere someone has to ration out. And I think to just your point even before that, a waterfall is assuming there are not enough assets who faces the heat. So I guess this is one of the places where a person who has a guaranteed yield is going to face the heat and it's going to come down substantially to the government.
One, of course, it might come down if the assets value don't support. But imagine if yeah. Absolutely. That was the fundamental issue. If my embedded yield was 15%, as you are rightly saying, how can I get a bigger principal by discounting at a lower rate? So my point is, when any law is being made for, there is a section, I think section 208, which talks of, removing the difficulties, and there is a 5-year period. So if there is, already some amendments have been done. In fact, the home, buyers have been prescribed a new format to file their claim. But I think even that's halfway, because a home buyer is a source of revenue from which everything is being serviced. To treat him as a creditor and to make him, undergo a haircut is not fair. In fact, overseas there is a concept of the buyer's lien. Anyway, that's a different thing. I just wanted to point out that there are few areas where there would be, amendments going forward, but this is the way to eventually come to a final figure. Of course, this is again a procedural part. It has to go through a specified account, and distribution has to be within 6 months. The assets that cannot be readily or advantageously sold can be distributed among the stakeholders. And it does happen very often in the market. You have an asset which is behind one asset and there is no right of the way. Nobody is going to pick it up. If it's a landed asset and there is no right of the way, nobody is going to pick up. In that case, if there is a fair value which has been already arrived at, it can be passed on. The second thing is, let's imagine an equipment and there's no taker for it. But the stakeholders are already in business, so somebody might take over. So this is again a flexibility which has been done. Of course, the liquidator has to return the money which has come to him but which was not due to him. And ultimately the final report on the completion of liquidation and any unclaimed proceeds are passed on to the public account of India, and if there is any detection of fraud, it gets suspended obviously. In case of an anticipated shortfall in debt payment, also the process gets suspended. Why? Because it's a voluntary liquidation and you have already made a statement that the debtors will be fully taken care of, and if there is any shortfall. So, whatever have been your declarations, the representation and warranties are sacrosanct. Those cannot be diluted. And of course, the preservation of records for 8 years in electronic form or fast track process. Now, that was about liquidation. I moved very fast through that. The whole idea was that now you should feel like going through it carefully. The bottom line here is that whether you are doing voluntary liquidation or a liquidation through under IBC, the normal liquidation, the process is well within your control. If it's done under Companies Act and the official liquidator comes in, then it's 2 5-year plans. That's what is happening. So this is the beauty of it. And ultimately, if you are a promoter and you are closing down your company, you are again in a driver's seat. And if you are a lender closing down another company where the liquidation value is better than enterprise value, again you are in a driver's seat. A fast track. I think what is important here is that here the period for resolution is just half. It's 180 days in the corporate responsibility resolution process. In the fast track is half of it. Of course, for the assets and income below a level as may be notified by the central government. So, as and when it comes, and the corporate debtor is such class of creditors or such amounts of debt as may be specified by the central government. So that is up to the government. That will come through. Obviously, when you talk about government, it will be through the board, the Insolvency Banking Board of India. From 180 days, it's 90 days, and if it has to be extended, it can be extended by 45 days. That is again the half. Both the creditor or the sponsor can file again the same thing as with the other process. The applicability of the CIRP, corporate insolvency resolution process, entirely applies here, and for the penalties and offences and penalties also the same thing is applicable. If you look at the regulation, this is captured by separate regulation. As I said, the code captures the basic principles of law, the robust principles of law, and the rest is all regulation or the rules. Eligibility for the resident professional is the same. Someone who is fit to become an independent director, or if he has been a part of any agency like a law firm or a consultancy firm or company secretary's firm or a CA firm, in the last 3 years, it shouldn't have had more than 10% of the revenues coming from. These are very standard things. Again, the public announcement, same thing. I think you must have seen the earlier ones. Earlier session must have captured. It's the same thing, so there is absolutely no difference. We will not spend time on this issue. Absolutely, the announcement, the invitation for the claims to be submitted, examination of claims, acceptance or rejection of claims here, absolutely the same, there is no difference. Verification, determination of amount, everything is in order. Only 15 point, debt in foreign currency, converted into rupees as on fast track commencement date. In case of the CIRP, as on the commencement date, the foreign exchange loan is crystallized into rupees at this point of time. Do you think there are some issues which do not get addressed here? See, the moment this gets crystallized today, and if the installment was to fall later on, and if it was, not hedged, the lenders will suffer later. What happens is that the banks, when they give the forex loan, it gets crystallized into the local currency on the day of that repayment of installment or the repayment of the debt. Here it's getting crystallized now. And I think there was no way out, there was a constraint here. If you are starting a date, you cannot have any figure which is contingent. Though there are provisions where how they are going to value the contingent figures, figures will depend on some contingency. Probably this could come up later on for a debate, and maybe there would be some change. Rest, of course, the process is the same here. Again, the COC meeting, the quorum is 33.5% by voting rights, and you are aware that for any reason, if it is postponed, it can be held the very next day, and whatever is the presence constitutes the quorum at that point of time. These are all the processes. These are the protocols for conducting the meetings. The whole idea is to maintain complete transparency and complete record of the meeting and contents of the meeting, which carries from the value of time, option to participate through video, so that there is absolutely no dispute raised as to the participation. You know that when you are doing the, when you are going through the legal process, our lawyer friends will tell you that the notice has to be serviced. You know that once the application is filed, within maximum 14 days as per the Act, as per the code, the application should be admitted or rejected or sought to be modified, assuming that the application was properly done. Within 14 days, it has to be admitted. And in another 14 days, maximum, the resident professional has to be appointed. Let's say the resident name is given 7 days plus another 10 days, maximum 17 days. So 17 and 14, 31 days is a maximum time for having an interim resident professional on board and who gets started. But when the issues came up of the, what is that, which law of time has to be given. So then time is being given for serving. So notice has to be serviced to the others. So while some cases are definitely getting admitted in 20-25 days, but there are cases which are also taking 3 months. So that's what it is. Whereas so essentially, law of natural justice would entail that nobody is left out. This makes sure that nobody gets left out. The interesting part is that the registered professional acts as the chairperson of the meeting. He calls, and make sure he records everything. Again, it's a process so that the law of natural justice is fully followed upfront, and then there is no repetition. Nobody can say that he has not been served. So it doesn't start again have an issue. And this applies from the conduct of the meeting to the voting in the COC and through a secured system. Again here, as in case of the earlier one, The valuer has to be appointed within 7 days. The rest of the process is definitely the same. There is one thing here. While the assets cannot be alienated after the start of the insolvency resolution process in the moratorium period, definitely I can sell my debt to somebody else. That's not an alienation. Now, if I sell my debt through an assignment, I have to obviously inform the COC and obviously the adjudicating authority. Sale of assets outside the ordinary course of business. This is again a flexibility. These have to be unencumbered and these cannot constitute more than 10% of the claims. And if the registered professional is not getting necessary cooperation, he can seek the assistance of the local administration, obviously through an order from the adjudicating authority. Fast track process costs are exactly the same. The fee to the registered professional, the cost incurred by the registered professional for running the business, the expenses of the government to facilitate the process. You know, if I am seeking the administration's help, obviously I have to account for that cost. Whatever it is, amount due to person whose rights are prejudicially affected on account of moratorium, and expenses incurred on or by the interim registered professional to the extent ratified, expenses incurred on or by the registered professional. The important point here is that amounts due to the person whose rights are prejudicially affected are included, which is very fair, but which will lead to some kind of innovative approaches in innovative corner, I should say. And when those approaches are adopted, the technical members will have to be very live. Right now, I don't see the alertness in technical members. In fact, I am told that the judicial members override the technical members. But of course, in one example, the technical member resigned in no time, absolutely. Hey, the essential supplies, cost of interim, everything is the same as the normal resolution process, which you've already gone through. Liquidation value, estimated realizable value of the asset. It should be computed in accordance with internationally accepted valuation standards and RP to provide the liquidation value to committee in electronic form. I have to say one thing here. For 4 years as MD and CEO of an ARC, I am interacting with other ARCs in the association. In fact, I had begun my career in the Organization Finance Department in the last millennium. Last millennium in 1983, I would say. No, valuation has always been very challenging. And here, when we were selling off, we had the SME means it was not necessarily small and medium enterprises. There were large also. And there were mid corporates also. We had trust only on two valuers among a posse of valuers. And what we saw that these valuers, in fact, the one was the best. We always preferred that. And if two valuers were needed because of our internal protocol, we went for the second one. We did hire other valuers for distant places. But what we found was these valuers, they came up with, a very well-rounded valuation, and which proved themselves in the marketplace when we did auction the assets. This is something which you have to keep in mind. The Companies Act has already released the guidelines for registration of the valuers. This is going to be very important. Of course, there is a murmur. Recently, I read in the papers that the lenders have said that the liquidation value is depressing the bids. I won't have views here. What do you feel? The liquidation value, which forms a part of the information memorandum, do you think that will lead to depression in the courts, the bids? Do you think so? Does it happen? Who is that?
Again, the question depend on prices
No, my question is, the taxation is done here, the court provides for that, and there is sound reason for that. Two sound reasons are that in case of, dissenting creditors, they should be given first the amount that they would have received had it been liquidated. So out of the section 53 protocol, what's called. The second is that in case of the liquidation, the liquidator, the same registered professional who becomes the liquidator, must sell the assets at this liquidation value and worst at 25% less. That's the code. So there is a rational bid for it. Okay? Now, the banks are saying that look, because we are giving these liquidation values, the bids are getting depressed. People are giving less bid. My question to you is, do you think it's a reasonable complaint? It's not reasonable. If you are a buyer, you don't go by what is given. You will hire your own people. That's a fact of life. Buyer beware. If I want to sell my ware, my valuation is going to reflect my buyers. The valuer's buyers is always evident. I would strongly suggest you to just Google Bain and Bain study, like JP Morgan and Gold. It's very relevant here. 100 road projects which were studied showed substantial, traffic estimation bias on account of borrowers. That's what it is. So it has to be done. You do it, but there is a reason why this. You want to say something?
If it is a resolution plan, and we are talking about resolution as a going concern, why to bring this concept of liquidation value at that juncture? Why not to do it if liquidation is necessary?
This is very reasonable, of course. But the point is, as a part of the resolution plan, this is perfectly okay if 100% are falling in line. But if there are two ways of doing it. You say that the rest 25% have to follow suit, or the court says that if you are a dissenting creditor, you can get what you would have got out of the liquidation value. But let me tell you one thing. Nobody gives credence to the valuation figure which is given. The buyer always uses his or her valuation. That's the commercial tool. So why are the banks making a bhalla of it? See my earlier figures which I have given. RBI says that you're going to write off the assets in 2 years, 50%, first year, 50%, second year. But imagine if you are an insolvent resolution professional, you are going to tell the valuer, boy, I want a realistic figure. Don't give me an outlandish figure. Why? Because tomorrow if it is liquidated, I have to sell it at that value or at worst 25% less. And if I fail to do that, I am out of business. You are going to insist on a realistic. And suppose if it comes to 20% of the book value, and you are the auditor of the bank, what are you going to tell the bank? I don't know RBI guideline. I see an asset shortfall. You have to make a provision. Am I right? That's going to happen. The information memorandum. Again, the same applies as in the case of CIRP, which you have already covered. But since I had to capture these regulations, I put it here. I would spend some time on the resolution plan. This is the crux of the document. Imagine if it's a resolution plan coming from you, it's a founding paper for an acquisition to happen. It has two components. One which is necessary part. What is necessary is what is as in the CIR. Regulation 36 captures various components and just, put them in various, components. Asset sale, transfer of all or whatever part. As a resolution plan, you might say that, we will transfer some asset, we'll sell some asset, we'll tweak the capacity. So there will be some asset sale. There will be stake sale. Because the new company is coming, if the promoter is 5%, somehow the promoter was managing 5%, you can't really stay with 5%. You say that, look, I'll have 51%. So there is going to be stake sale component. Security of the debt. Now there is 972 crore, and now if you are reducing to 53 crore, that too to be paid after 1 year moratorium in 3 yearly installments later. You're going to say that, look, I want a satisfaction of charge for the remaining. My now liability remains 54. The biggest thing is the reliefs and concessions from the creditors. Because resolution plan involves trimming of liabilities, and the liabilities which cause financial risk have to be trimmed, and which is the debt. So there is going to be a haircut or headcut. This has to come in the resolution plan. And other aspects, what kind of amendments we want in the NOA's AOA. The issue of securities, whether there would be equity issue or warrant, again it's a matter of total innovation. And therefore, as a resolution, professional, if you can come up with an information memorandum which goes beyond the necessaries as per section 29 and regulation 36, you can really catalyze acquisition. So it's quite a good idea to add something of an enterprise value. But the trouble is, two troubles are there. If you want to come up with an enterprise value, you should have comprehended the business, the relative strength. You should have done a total bottom-up approach and come up with that. And you have to have therefore a big team, the investment banking team who will do it. And then you get people on board. In Hyderabad case, day before yesterday my friend came, he says this is a very good company. And just about 38 days remain for 270 days to be over. Can you do something about it? I said, this is one company, Oil Country Tubular, which I was handling as general manager of IDBI's Hyderabad office way back in 2002. And this was a good company. Now this is coming to distress, and I said, I'm surprised that nothing has been done. Now the resolution professional was from Hyderabad. So I gave a call to the boutique investment bank in Hyderabad, and then the $100 million distress fund fellow has sought the information to the pick it up. What am I trying to say is that whenever you are doing the resolution information memorandum, keep this in mind. Can you do with the aid of the business professionals, the technical professionals, and enterprise value? Can you do it? Second point is, if you can do it, if you put in the information memorandum, then it becomes public. You may propose to the bank, look, I will give you for you to evaluate others. That's quite possible, but what I'm trying to say is that to get a high-class resolution plan which maximizes the recovery of the creditor. Here, what will be the single, earlier also we said that the best resolution plan wins eventually under section 30. Who gets a company? Somebody who proposes the best resolution plan. Now what is best resolution plan? What is the bidding criteria? What are the criteria? Obviously, if you are the bank, you are going to see what's giving you the best. Number one. Number two, are those figures credible having regard to the people? So you are going to evaluate two things. Who is the party? Is the party credible? And are the figures credible? But that's possible with this. And therefore, as I said earlier, this is a Swedish model actually of a compulsory auction without using so many words. And as and when that happens, you will definitely see the values going up. If World Bank says 13.7, RBI statistics 10.3, but RBI statistics says, you know, that it's the assets not which are not all been liquidated. Tomorrow there may be more money coming. So 10.3 to 16 it might happen. But World Bank thing relates to the specific assets which have been done. So it's 13.7, let's say. Quite possibly, with this done properly, it could lead to 20-25%, which would be a very substantial jump. The second point about IBC is, since it's time bound, it stops the impair and abuse of the asset. If it's under SURFACE or RDDBI, it's totally misused, nothing remains for it. And therefore the impairment and the time value loss is so tremendous in those acts. This is the best deal for that. So if you're dealing with the bank, go and sell them this idea, tell them that we'll give you the best deal. I would appeal this to even lawyers and child accountants both. These are for the mandatory contents of the resolution 10, and the same thing, the cost to be paid first, liquidation value to the operational creditors, and provide for such payment priority to the financial creditors before expiry of 30 days. Those, you know, the dissenting, liquidation value to dissenting financial creditors, and provide for such payment before any recoveries. Term of the plan and implementation schedule, adequate means of implementation, adequate to supervise its implementation. This last one has come repeated. So this is again an advisory to the company to come up with a robust resolution plan which is fully compliant with Regulation 37. It is very important. And I want your comment, some comment on this particular regulation. Regulation 36(1)J. I think it's not 36(1)J, I stand by it is 37(1)J. 4 variants under Regulation 37(1)J. The beauty is that you can seek waiver of the government dues, past and maybe future. When future, if you are getting, you know, write-off of interest that you are deemed income, which will attack tax, but a matter of corporate tax, and if you just can't bear that, you will see that. Final? Capital gains tax also. So this is a extremely robust, and I strongly suggest that you people spend time on Regulation 36 and 37 and pick up the deals which are happening. In fact, this is just about starting, just about the plans have been approved. You have a role to play. And you know, there are not all promoters are autonomous. Whenever I handle the sessions for the banks, I tell them that anybody is coming to you for borrowing for a project, you should roll out the red carpet because that person is treating jobs. At the same time, if you are lax, he's going to take you for the long run, so you have to be careful about it. Eligibility criteria? That's a great area. The government has to come up. Actually, okay, what's your name? Mr. Dubey is saying why this kind of a criteria? Actually, fast track. See, of the whole process, which is the most time consuming. The most time consuming is to get the bill. Now, no acquisition happens in a short time. And internationally also study shows that acquisitions which are done hurriedly lead to distress. Now, in 180 days or 270 days, to have the acquisition done is very difficult. And I'm absolutely certain that there will be amendments going forward. See, if you remember a few years ago, BSCS was there. BSES had walked into one of the distribution circles in Orissa under a management contract, and I think it ran for about 3 years, and then it took over that circle. You know the interesting part, during that management contract, they had arrived at transmission and distribution loss for 35%. And when they took over, they realized the digits were different, 53%. So it's that difficult. So I agree that it's a tough job, but smaller and mid corporates can be done within this period. In fact, this can be done, and there is no reason for someone to drag for 180 days. There are mid corporates which can be done very fast. So even without saying that you can have fast done. But anyway, let's see what regulations come, we'll see that. Yeah? No, fast track, but those figures have they come?
Yeah.
What are the figures?
Basically, you sold something very, so basically, just startups.
Startups. Startups. But fair enough, okay, let me have that, share. But the point is, there is no bar on doing it very fast. There is a small hazard here. You know what happens is, the decision official puts fee per month. Now for him or her, it's a good idea to drag for some time. In fact, there should be some incentive built up. Okay, this is your figure, you do efficiently. You like in case of road projects that they are doing. Your implementation period is 2.5 years. But if you construct the road in 2 years, those additional 6 months, you definitely get your traffic and the earning go to you. So you have a bonus there. Determinants of successful resolution process. I think we have discussed that. I have deliberately done this. Information memorandum. That's one big determinant. Information memorandum will contain all that is given in Regulation 36. But you will have to be prepared to have more. It's nice to give the historical figures, but how about the analysis? How about the business analysis? How about the peer comparison? How about the valuation? You may not give under information memorandum, but if the bidders come, then they might ask you a lot of things and you have to have figures available. The second point is getting multiple resolution applicants. This requires investment banking skills. Now, investment banking would mean that you have a fair idea of its valuation, you have a fair idea of who could be interested in this. And when you begin that, you will not have idea, but then you are going to discuss with your network and figure it out. And definitely, if you say that something is available, the other party is going to ask you the details. Give me a 2-page profile, and that should be very substantive. So that is very important. The challenges can be met. I would say the applicant is corporate debtor who is willing to forego control for the sake of revival. I just gave an example of that Hyderabad. The fellow is willing to forego the control. The fellow who came to me said that, he's saying that the sustainable net is 300 crore, but the value of his plant and machinery is 500 crore. I said, what is the plant and machinery? He says there is an electric arc furnace of 60, and then there's a rolling mill and all that. I said, this is not even 200 crore. I'll get you the best of the steel experts who in no time will tell you what's the value of it. You are not well informed. So what's important is that you have to have tie-up with those experts when you are going to do that. And when you do that, you are embedding the investment banking skills. And not feasible where the debtor is non-compliant. So, yes, the fast track process, if the debtor himself is approaching, probably this could happen. But what is important is if you are advising someone, you have to say, boy, this is all which is to be done by the other party. Better be ready with that and then only go to the NCLT, so that you can save substantial time. So you will have to do a fair amount of homework beforehand. That's the only way to garner success. Okay, this is the most important discussion I want to have. Effective settlement and determination of inherent value of asset and asset reconstruction. I am treating asset reconstruction phrase as restructuring. Effective settlement is possible if the enterprise value is maximized. It's a truism, you might say. Kya nahi baat? But you know, I often tell my colleagues, there was an advertisement, a car advertisement, if you remember. You know, there's a great setting, one very sophisticated lady in, you know, some American accent. She's telling about some car. Then somebody like me from the audience gets up and he asks me in Hindi. She's, who is this? Then he asks, remember that? So this is the value. And I'm telling you, this applies day in, day out. And it's a truism, granted. But let's look at this formula. What is the equity value? What is the equity value? It's a maximum of these two figures, V minus D and 0. Is there any doubt about it? V minus D, V is the enterprise value minus debt or 0, maximum of the two. If the debt amount is so high that it leaves no margin, then equity value is 0. You don't know this further down. Okay, that's what. So, the corporate debtor seeks to maximize V minus D. And the creditor seeks to maximize D. And the corporate debtor seeks to maximize V minus D. He is seeking to maximize V and is seeking to minimize V. And information asymmetry, which we have heard. The resolution applicant would try to project a V which suits him. The V may be 100, he might project 80 or 70. And that's where the resolution professional can help the committee of creditors to come to grips with the best value. When the committee of creditors meeting happen, you know, the fellows don't realize that this is a statutory meeting where they have to come and make decisions and tell. They say, oh, we don't have orders. They go back and again come back, again the same story. I've seen 3 to 4 creditors committee meetings where one should suffice. A successful resolution plan is one where both the creditors and corporate debtors agree to deal. I'm talking of a purely professional approach here. Fixing can be done definitely. We're going to discuss one of the cases which has been a great subject of articles. You know which case? A lot of articles, a lot of news items have come. Innovative is for a different reason. That was a very interesting legal aspect. But the financial aspect, you know, which case has become the hot discussion item. Remember the show? Huh? Which one? Not you.
Synergies today.
Which one?
Synergies today.
I heard. Which one?
Synergies.
Synergies two ways. In fact, the cover page article in Money Life was written by me on 15th September, and I had covered that. We're going to discuss a little bit of that in this. Let's first finish on this. Maximizing of V. And the key lies in catalyzing very transparent and competitive bidding from parties present in business or PE and hedge funds. Now, is it something which is logical, but is it theoretical or practical? The fact of life is that the PE funds and hedge funds are picking up deals and the operating companies in the US also, in in my article I have presented. In fact, it's available. It can be down. You have the link available. You can just Google my name, and you will get that. You will find it very interesting, including synergies to that. We will discuss a few things of that. Not to pass a judgment on the synergy rule issue, but how the things can be analyzed. Now, coming to this. So here, information memorandum go beyond the necessaries, what is given in the code and the regulation, come up with a true value that it is there, and categorize the deal. My guess is that sooner or later we will, even see the management buyouts. All the creditors have the same problem here. So maybe in some cases where the bankers are uncomfortable with creditors, they can have that, very bright employees, the top management, the management buyouts will have it. And those will be essentially the LBOs, the leverage buyouts. That's what will happen. But this hedge funds and this, they become about 1/4 of the auctions the operating companies and PE and hedge funds are picking up. And if you know, KKR tried to buy stake in International ARC, but eventually it fell through. Recently, IARC, International ARC, one fund has picked up stake. And CDPQ is the Canadian pension fund is investing, it's co-investing with Edelweiss ARC. So that's what is happening. And they are all waiting for this thing to happen. So in case you are into this, I think you got to become now, mobile investment bankers. The last bullet, but not the least bullet, it's not merely the information memorandum. If anybody has to acquire, there are all kinds of due diligence. Accounting, finance will be definitely there. The market due diligence, the technical due diligence. And I have seen myself. I raised 975 crore for a British company. The technical fellow sat with me and we made a financial model. I said, Dilip, you know the things. Please let me know this kind of specifications for the iron ore fines. How much will be needed for 1 ton of the pellet? He gave a figure of 1.22 tons of iron ore fine per ton of the pellet of a specific characteristic. And on that basis the funding was done. Later on I found that actually the figure was 1.48 tons per ton of this. Imagine the kind of mistake in the projection. Now, when you're doing it, you need to really have experts who are not going to give you this kind of a data. And there would have to be a data room for that, which is going to come going forward. Any question on this? Any question on this formula? Anybody has any issue on this? See, partnership. I think these are about to be notified. The chairman, Mr. Sahu, Dr. Sahu, did mention about this. So no provincial Insolvency Act and all that, which is repealed. So you have somebody who has got a default of 1 lakh or more, and this figure can be increased later on by the government as and when it comes. What's happening here? I'm not going to spend on this. Essentially, the crux of the matter is, we're talking of a fresh start process. Get the fellow, he can make an application, submit information about his financial position. The revision professional will evaluate it and identify, come up with, the qualifying debt and the others. And once he is convinced, the process starts. But the moment the application is, submitted, there is an interim monitoring period, and once the application is confirmed, For processing, then you have the moratorium period. Of course, the numbers are not given, but it is expected that it will be very fast. Again, the same process here. So I have given it for the sake of record, but we are not going to discuss the same process. Only thing is, once the admission of application happens, the moratorium starts, the legal and action and suits are stayed as usual. You cannot alienate any of the assets, so everything is as usual. And any creditor can raise objection within 10 days, of course, and RP must examine all those protocols are there. And once the RP gives a decision, the aggrieved party can again challenge for various reasons. He has not given an opportunity or he has colluded with the party. Now, these kinds of regulations make sure, the sections, this law makes sure that the resolution professional, if he is any slightest idea of colluding, will not collude. But I don't expect that, when the amount is what is 1 lakh, something will happen. But obviously, no act is formulated for a short vision, it's a long vision. It could become a crore also going forward. Again, the replacement of the RP is the same process. RP can apply for help to the adjudicating authority for disciplining the other party, and even he can seek revocation in case during the process, if the figures have undergone change and there is no justification for this. Discharge order. After everything is done, if the qualifying debt is finalized from which he is going to be discharged, he will make at least 7 days before the moratorium period comes to an end. The adjudicating authority passes a discharge order and it discharges the debtor from penalties in respect of qualifying debt, interest, including interest in respect of qualifying debt from the date of application till the date of discharge order, and any sums owed under any contract in respect of qualifying debt from the date of application till the date of discharge order. There are certain amounts which are not allowed, which is again very routine. Now, this is all about those portions which we had listed. Now, I want to discuss, as I said, one case, and that was Synergy's Dubey. I would have avoided the name, but name is anyway there, and we are not making a final judgment. What happened was, Edelweiss ARC was one, Alchemist ARC was second, there was third, which was Millennium Finance, and the fourth creditor was the company's promoter itself, the other group company. So that the fourth was not counted. So you had Millennium Finance, which was commanding about 76% of the debt. Edelweiss had something like 30% of the debt, and the remaining was with Alchemist. Right? Now, the committee of creditors cleared a resolution plan where against a debt of 972 crore, about 53.5 crore was proposed to be paid to the lenders, and about 1.5 crore to others, other liabilities, including the government liabilities. So that's where, section 53, if you were to go by that, then government would have got nothing. But here something was kept for the government. So that's maybe always a judgment how to go about it. These amounts were to be paid after a moratorium of 1 year in 3 yearly installments equal for the creditors without interest, and for the government and other creditors 5 yearly installments after moratorium 1 year. Right? The first, the residential professional was to get the 50 lakh fee upfront, but others were to wait. Edelweiss KRC raised objections. Now here comes the crux, and I want to have your view. Edelweiss KRC said that Millennium Finance, the debt which Millennium Finance was having, was bought from the group company. The group company had bought debt of 5 banks, housed it itself, and then passed on by way of assignment to Millennium Finance. Since the resolution applicant who won this bid was this particular company which had passed on the debt to Millennium Finance, Edelweiss said that Millennium Finance was a related party and related party wasn't allowed as per the code. The second point that they made was that although Millennium Finance paid, bought this debt for 40 crore, something like how much, 700 odd crore, for 40 crore they bought, it had not given any consideration for that, and therefore it was an illegal transaction. These were the 2 objections. My point to you is, how much of credence will you give to the Edelweiss's objections? What will you say to this? These 2 objections. What are the things? One, it says it's a related party. Simply because Synergist Casting was the resolution applicant which won. Synergist Casting was the holding company of Synergist. Synergist Casting had bought the loans from the bank and then sold off. Now you see here, the operational creditors, okay, do not have the voting. It's a financial creditor. Now you have, you have some dues who are operational creditors. But if you securitize your operational credit with a finance company in the normal course of business, then that becomes a financial credit. Okay, this is not something of that kind. Synergy Casting is bought from 5 lenders and sold off to. As long as Synergist Casting was holding that debt, it was obviously not counted in the holding. But Synergist Casting sold it to Millennium Finance. Secured. Also. What would you say? First objection was that it's a related party. What would you say? Huh? Not a related party. Mr. Ashish Anand said that essentially what he's saying that there is no documentary proof. Essentially you are saying we don't have any paper to prove that. He's saying the corporate veil is there. The question is, can you pierce the corporate veil? Is that the point?
Can I just clarify?
It's not a relief. Transfer was there. Related party.
I'll come to that. Yeah.
Firstly, I am the one who is advising and representing Edelweiss in this matter. So this is very publicly said that this was one of the objections of Edelweiss, that MFL is a related party, but that is not the objection of Edelweiss. Edelweiss has never ever said that Millennium Finance is a related party. It is only saying that a debt which has been assigned to a third party on the eve of the notification of repeal of SICA on a 100 rupees stamp paper with no registration, with no consideration changing hands, it is a sham transaction. So publicly, I don't know why in the media, because the order is structured in that way, And that is the appeal which is coming up before NCLT 11. That is the very plea that the NCLT has completely gone on some different tangent. That is not the objection. So while we can discuss this, but that's not the objection of LTI.
Okay, I just add. The second point which I was saying was the consideration not being there. First is, by the way, if I remember the order, in fact I have written in my article, which party Harish also told me, but that's aside from that, if there is no consideration,
I'm interested to know your view on the first one.
if there is no consideration, then obviously it becomes a sham transaction. Okay, pardon?
It's a colorable exercise.
See, I tell you how we can use a corporate veil here.
Yeah.
Okay, now what happens is, if there is no consideration, this NCT can't say that its argument is without merit. That's what it has mentioned in the order. So two things here. Matter of related party, the RP says that she is not concerned about the interstate disputes. There was no proof about related party, which you mentioned. Definitely, you can't go by emotions, you have to go by the facts. You can't be emotional. But second point, this being a, transaction without legal basis, if there is no consideration, then there is no basis. Can you believe? NCLT passed an order, accepted the resolution plan, in which this 40 crore was to be paid to Millennium Finance in 3 equal quarterly installments after 3 yearly installments after a moratorium 1 year without interest. So 40 by 3, it was 39.7, rounded up to 40 crore. Okay? What it says is that this would be netted against the money that Millennium has to pay to Synergist Casting. Now, can you believe it's a joke? So in my article, what I wrote was that any finance company which borrows such a risk-proven asset, buys such a risk-proven assets, does it for a very significant recovery. And if I assume a 25% yield on this deal, the present value of all the money which has been, proposed in the resolution plan will work out to 25 crore. Whereas my purchase price is 40 crore, within months I am settling down for 25 crores even without a murmur. Okay, which means I am ready to smilingly incur a loss of 15 crore. That's the reason. But at the same time, at the same time, this so-called loss is notional because there is no outgo of funding. So I said that this was a notional loss, but it very clearly showed that the consideration was zero or negative having regard to the transaction cost. Right? 100 rupees stamp paper, that's illegal. Obviously, you have to pay the stamp duty. It's a small stamp duty, but it's a registration you have to pay. That's one. But at the same time, if he is 40 crore, if he is treating as a debt with him, he has to. There would be some deemed income on account of the interest. That I have not gone into. I said I talked to one tax expert. He said there would be tax on the deed. I said I don't want to go into it. It's very clear that it is a zero contribution or negative contribution. Yeah, you want to say something?
No, before that, I just want to add one more thing. And NCLT, when you talk about the notional loss, it is no more notional loss because NCLT has modified the resolution.
Yeah, I will add that. Then, if you do go through that article, just Google manual. Then NCLT, after objection from Edelweiss, modified the order, saying that they have to first pay 40 crore and then they'll get that. So then I assume that they will pay 40 crore by 31st of August because the order is 2nd August. And if they pay on 31st, then the present value becomes 30 crore. So you are smilingly foregoing 10 crore. It's an invisible sweetheart deal. Doesn't it pierce the corporate veil? It can't be like that. And when you have technical members, they are supposed to ask this question. So it's time the technical members are, subjected to some kind of a change. Yeah, sir. Okay. So this is what it was. There's another one where also there has been a big haircut. Let's understand one thing. If you are looking at some career opportunities here, it's from both the sides. The corporate side as well as the banking side. And the banks are able to take the hit because earlier it was very difficult for them. Because then there was, CBC, etc. Here there is no such thing now. At least it's happening under the aegis of a resolution professional. And there is no such thing here. Ultimately, somebody had to, bell the cat, which is happening. And the 13.7% figure which World Bank showed, even that happens, that would be great. So there is no doubt that the banks would need a recapitalization, substantial. But this kind of a, evergreening will stop. I think this is a great opportunity for IBC to, clear the mess. What happened? I said asset overstatement was the word I used. Essentially, padding. I tell you, I will not tell the name of the company. I raised 1185 crore for a project. The cost was 1970 crore. Later I came to know that the actual cost was little less than 800 crores. Okay, if the paddings are in multiples, then when the assets are sold, they are going to fetch much less. The banks are realizing. At the same time, if you pad the cost so much, your fixed cost becomes so high, you are uncompetitive. And now IBC has come as an opportunity to correct these historical wrongs so that you can indeed correct, make the companies competitive. That's what it is. So you have a great opportunity, of course, to resolve these issues, right? And now I would welcome questions, if any, on the matter.
We have a specific panel discussion in Q&A session. So, all the questions we have. So that we can take